Hey, I'm Pastor Scott, and today we're going to talk about washing each other's feet. So in Exodus 34, we have this instance where God actually passes in front of Moses. And this is the first time in all of the Bible where God describes himself. Listen to what he says. This is Exodus chapter 34, starting at verse 6. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yeah, you heard me right. Washing each other's feet. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine coming home and you have to take your shoes off? Maybe that's normal for your household. And your parents come over and say, wait, we got to get the bucket of water out and we're going to wash your feet off so that way you can walk around the house. You know, it wasn't unusual back in biblical times for people to be washing each other's feet every time they entered someone else's home. That's because the streets were dirty back then. And I'm not just talking about like dirt and grass and, dust, that kind of stuff. I mean, they were filthy with waste, let's say human waste. Can somebody say number one and number two?
What?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't abnormal for somebody on the second floor of their home to take their bucket of you-know-what and throw it out the window into the streets. So imagine living, in biblical times and walking these streets. I mean, it's not like walking down the streets of Lancaster County and just kind of, going out around the certain little piles that tend to be on the road here in Lancaster County. It's not like that. I mean, it's kind of all mixed in together, and so it was just a normal thing back then for people to wash their feet as they came in. Now, if I were to come in someone's house back then, I wouldn't wash my own feet. Actually, what they would do is they would have a servant. This servant would bend down and they would actually wash my feet for me. Oh, that's cold. It was kind of a gesture. It was a gesture of welcoming me into their home, right? But, only servants were the ones that actually would wash people's feet. It was seen as like something you just didn't want to do. It was kind of gross, right? So only servants would do that. For the homeowner to actually get down on their knees and do that was just unheard of. It just didn't happen. So we see foot washing in a couple places in the Bible, and one of the most famous ones is in John chapter 13, and that's where we actually have what's known as the Last Supper. Maybe you've heard of that, and that's where we get communion from, where Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me," where they drink the wine and eat the bread. Well, John doesn't record that. John records something the other Gospels don't record. The foot washing that happens. Jesus takes off his outer clothes. He wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a large bowl. Then he began to wash his disciples' feet. He dried them with the towel that was wrapped around them. Now, this is really interesting. So Jesus is pictured here as kind of the host of this meal, and he's the one that's offering to wash his disciples' feet. Now, disciples, they're the people that follow Jesus. They're the people that learn from Jesus. And a lot of times disciples would run errands for their teacher. Jesus is the teacher here, right? They would do all kinds of errands. They would do whatever their teacher needed. But one thing disciples would never do for their teacher is they would never actually wash their teacher's feet.
Ew, gross.
Because again, that was seen as too disgusting. That was back then, they would have been like, no, that's only for the servants to do. Like, you guys, you don't have to do that. We don't need to do that. So here we have Jesus who's hosting the meal, and he's, taking off his outer clothes so that he can actually be the one to wash his disciples' feet. What in the world's going on here? So he actually came to Simon Peter. Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," Peter said, "you will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you can't share life with me." "Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, wash my hands and my head too." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs to wash only his feet. The rest of his body is clean, and you are clean, but not all of you are." So again, Jesus is like, look, if you took a bath or you took a shower, chances are you're clean, except for your feet. That's because you actually took the time to walk over here through the dust and the dirt and all the junk on the streets. So your feet aren't clean. They need washed. Not all of you is clean. Verse 11. Jesus knew who was going to hand him over to his enemies. That was why he said not everyone was clean. When Jesus finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes, then he returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord. You are right, that is what I am. I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet. So you should wash one another's feet. I have given you an example. You should do as I have done for you." Okay, so is Jesus saying that we should all just kind of wash one another's feet? Is that something we should regularly do? Well, Jesus isn't saying, hey, you better start washing each other's feet. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, look at my example. Look at how I stripped down to servant's clothes. I went down to a servant's level and I became the ultimate servant for you. See, every time Jesus was wiping their feet, okay, it was kind of like he's wiping off their sins and it's like imprinting their sins on him and on his towel. And every time the disciple next in line would come, that towel would get even dirtier and dirtier. I mean, there were 12 disciples here. By the end, that towel is just filled with all the grime and the dirt, right? So this is really symbolic of how we're to serve people, how we're to have compassion on them. We're supposed to love them, and we're supposed to look at our Master, our Lord Jesus, and we're supposed to take his example and have compassion like that on others. Compassion is just when you really care for somebody else. Your heart kind of goes out to them because they're in need. You see a clear need, and everything inside you wants to do something about that need. You have compassion on them. That's why we're supposed to serve others, not because we have to, but because as we love God and as we learn to love God, that also looks like loving others as Jesus loved us. So now it's time to ask your parents or guardians some questions of your own. You're going to be in the driver's seat for these questions. Go ahead and ask them these. What are some examples of how we can be compassionate to other people? Jesus was the ultimate example of showing compassion. Why do you think it's important for us to show compassion to other people? All right, kids. So as you go throughout your day today, what I want you to do is think of different ways that you could actually show compassion. Now, maybe you're only going to see your parents for the rest of the day, but what are some ways that you can show your parents or guardians compassion, or your friends, or your brother or sister? Just think of some ways that you can show compassion and then go do it. So that's it for today. We will see you next time.